Today we have with us Diane Bradley, formerly known as Diane Guthrie-Gresham. She's a retired female track and field athlete from Jamaica who specialized in the long jump and the heptathlon during her career. She's a two-time Olympian. She has represented Jamaica and George Mason University around the world in track and field. She is ranked amongst the world's most prominent jumpers. Diane holds the NCAA championship meet record for the women's heptathlon, as well as the Caribbean record for that event. Diane also broke the long-standing jockey Jonyer-Kersee's NCAA meet record. She was inducted in the Penn Relays Athletic Hall of Fame. Welcome, Diane Bradley.
Diane, again, thank you so much for taking the opportunity to be a part of this YouTube podcast kind of thing that I'm working on. So we normally want to start at the beginning. Describe to the audience a little bit of your childhood.
Okay, so I was born in Manchester, Jamaica, and grew up in Santa Cruz. That was my last home in Jamaica. So from about age 3 to 17 or so, I was living in Santa Cruz with my parents. I have an older sister and 2 younger brothers. I always tell people if I grew up in the States, they'd probably have me on some ADHD medicine because I was hyperactive. I was always jumping over everything, just couldn't walk. I was skipping, jumping, hopping, everything else. But academically, I think that's where I stood out. And I was reading from a very young age, as I recall, about 2. And my father, he was the one who kind of reinforced my reading, even though my parents weren't very educated because they had to drop out of school in the 5th grade, both of them. But especially my father, he knew the benefits of education. So even at that young age, he would say, you can be anything you want. As long as it's in your head, nobody can take it out. Education can take you anywhere you want to go in life. So I always kind of remember those things. And, that stuff came very naturally to me. I had very good memory. And as I said, I was an early reader. So I went to Santa Cruz all age. And I only spent 4 years there because I was first in my class from grade 1. So I skipped to grade 3, then 4, and I skipped to grade 6. And then we had common entrance back in those days. Mm-hmm. And so I remember I had 3 chances because my birthday is in October, but I passed the first one. So here I was at 10. Every time I tell people that, they look at me kind of crazy. But so yeah, I started Hampton at 10 and then I turned 11 in October. And this was, I think, in 82, I think. So anyhow, that was kind of my childhood. I mean, obviously on the personal side, there were all kinds of upheavals. I mean, my mother left home when I was 10 because my father's business wasn't doing well. And back in those days, high school, well, probably still now, high school isn't free. And certainly a school like Hampton and Monroe was uniform and books and tuition and this and that was probably more expensive than the average high school. So my younger brother was smart too, and my sister was there. So my mother had to leave home to try to find work to make ends meet so we could pay school fee and whatnot. So I was without my mother for those crucial years. And that was one of the big pivotal moments in my life, age 10, when she left. So I went to high school and she went to the grill and started a business. She had a restaurant, which was there for about 30 years. But those were some of the sad years of my life. And that really changed my life, truthfully. But that was kind of my 0 to 18 in a nutshell, in terms of the fast version.
Right, fast version. Version. And I didn't know that about you, even though I know you for so long. I didn't know that about. So that's very refreshing to hear. Because a lot of times we look at athletes and we look at them and we think that everything is dandy and all that type of thing. But if only they know the middle, they only see the beginning and the end.
Yeah.
You talk about you when you were a little kid, you'd be jumping over stuff. So now we know where the jumping came from, and we'll get to that later on.
Yeah.
So when did you realize that you had a talent for track? When did that happen?
That was at Hampton. I think at Santa Cruz all age. As I said before, like on our lunch breaks, we would make, I distinctly remember us making jump ropes from, I don't know if you remember the plastic thing from the inside of a bottle top, and we would put them together and make a rope. And so kids would hold the ends and I would jump over and they'd call me sailing boat, but I never heard of track. I mean, I was just jumping, you know, and we would run home from Santa Cruz to Longwood where I lived. And so, but, you know, my parents never knew anything about sports, obviously. And I've never heard the word track or anything like that. I mean, back in those days, I don't think I've ever seen track on TV or anything. So there were no athletes in my family. So I didn't know there was a sport or anything else. It was just playing. So but when I went to Hampton, that was my first introduction to sort of formalized sports, which was PE. And so I was probably 11 at this point. And my first PE teacher, I call her Miss McNeil. Her name is actually now Mullings. We're friends on Facebook, but anyway, I still call her Miss McNeil. So she was my first PE coach, and long jump was one of the things we did. And you know, if you know anything about Hampton, Hampton is a very, they call prestigious, all girls.
It's so funny that you said that, because I even have that is a part of what I was going to ask you. That Hampton is such a prestigious school and they're all about academics.
Yes.
So there has to be some people that influence your decision to do long jump.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hampton was what exactly how you described it. It was unladylike to do sports. We wore knickers on our uniforms and things like that. But we did have sports, and so I remember I'd never heard of long jump, but Miss Matney showed us, you know, you run, you hit this board and you jump, and there's sand. And so everybody was doing that. And at some point she said the first person who jumps 12 feet wins a candy bar. And it was an American candy bar. I think it was called Kudos. So of course the competition started, and you know, we're all trying to get this 12 feet. And eventually I got 12 feet. So I got my candy bar, and that was like I was crowned the you know, whatever, the jumper. So literally that's where it started. So from that day I knew I was the best jumper. And so again, so she's the one who instilled that in me. And then we started thinking about high jump at some point, but it was more fun. It wasn't that serious, and we didn't have the right equipment. So, you know, like high jump, we didn't have the sponge and whatnot, but we had some stuff. The school certainly didn't support that, but she realized that I was a cut above, you know, so she encouraged me. And we just kept doing it. And then we had sports day. And then of course I would win at sports day. And then eventually she was like, wow, maybe you can go to Western Champs. And so then I went to Western Champs. I didn't start winning.
Was that just for the long jump, or?
No, as far as I can remember, it was high and long. It was always high jump and long jump. So Western Champs is usually down like Manning's, if I remember, but you know, I was always in the top 3. And again, because things were so bad at home, I never had any self-confidence. I had no mother support. My sister, you know, I was a lonely, depressed child, literally. I didn't know then, but I was just doing it to do it, you know. And then I think it probably wasn't until 9th grade, which was, I was about 12, when maybe by the 2nd year, I probably won Western Champs. And so, you know, eyes kind of opened, and then you started hearing, oh, there's national champs at Sabina Park. I don't know if you've ever been to Sabina Park, but at that time it was Sabina Park. And so that's when the school kind of got involved, because then we needed to travel to, you know, to Spanish Town, I think Sabina Park was. And as I said, they kind of frowned upon this girl jumping and going over bars and whatnot. But I think for my coach, it was probably exciting. She never, you know, probably coached anybody at that level. And for me, it was what it was. You know, I didn't think much of it.
It's pretty much fun, right?
Huh?
It was more fun. It was.
Yeah. It was just, honestly, at that point, it was just something to do. That felt good. And then, but gradually, I think once I went to the first Sabina Park. And again, I didn't win the first time, but I was probably always in the top 3 or so. And it was somewhere around 9th grade. And you know, I think I was motivated as well because for the first time in my life at Hampton, I found someone who was as bright as me, well, brighter than me for the first time in my life. And so that was a blow to my ego, I guess, because, you know, all throughout from 2 to 10, I was always number 1 in my class, but at Hampton, boy, there were tons of kids that, but you know, the other thing I discovered then is way later years when I got to know myself and my life was that losing my mother during, you know, such a crucial time had a big impact, but I didn't know. Right. I just assumed I got duns or whatever, but I think it was that literally I was in that space of no support, depression. I wasn't cute. Nobody, like, you know, my sister didn't really care for me. She was older than me. She never embraced me. And you know what I mean? Like, and I had nobody to come home and complain to or cry to. And my father wasn't paying much attention to anybody. So I was really in a lonely place. So track started filling that void by about my 3rd year. And then I started hearing things like, oh, if you continue to perform well, you could go here, you could go there. So this was Miss McNeil. And then of course I started traveling to Kingston, and that was, oh, big time. That
was like foreign, right?
Yes. So yeah, and that's really how it was. And then eventually there was some mutual life games or something like that. And then I represented Jamaica for the first time at 12 in Miami. And I had to get a passport. I had to actually, my first time I traveled on what they call a temporary passport.
I did too. Funny you say that, because I recently I traveled twice on it. Twice. Because I could not afford to buy. Yeah. Could not afford to get a passport.
Yeah. I remember my mother, you know, leaving the grill from her little cook shop and running all over Kingston. Yeah, so I had a temporary passport for a while, and then came to Miami Classics, and boy, yes, that was it. I mean,
eye opener for you
to America.
Yes.
So that's when I kind of put 2 and 2 together. And yeah, I would say maybe my headspace kind of changed in terms of, okay, this could have some kind of meaning or impact in my life. I didn't know what a scholarship was. I didn't know what college was, but I did hear that as well. Like, you could get a scholarship, but that wasn't exciting as you could go to America.
Right?
So really, that's kind of how I got to that point.
Okay, and that is really good. It's good. Because since Hampton is a prestigious school, right? And we know they're all into academics and ladylike type of atmosphere and stuff like that. How were you able to balance the track? I know you were smart, and did you find that challenging? Because I know that can be challenging for a lot of kids.
Sure. And I have to, for that, I really have to just give credit to God. It was just natural talent. Until I came to college, I would say I never really trained per se. You know, I was winging everything. So I didn't get that support. I started getting the support, I think, the first time I was on TV. And then the name Hampton started to be in the news, you know, like when they started announcing teams and it said Hampton girls and whatnot. So then my principal was kind of like, ooh, we're on TV kind of thing. But it was really Miss McNeil. I give all the credit to her to stay persistent and push me and stand behind me, because from a training standpoint, that wasn't the issue, because I was what they call a day girl. So I had to catch the bus back home every day. So I didn't do much training. I didn't warm up, I didn't jog, I didn't stretch. The reality of that hit me when I first transferred to Stets and had to run 1 lap around that track, and I hyperventilated the whole time.
So we're gonna jump to that too, and that was gonna be my next question. But before I get there, did you play any other sports, or that was it?
No, I played netball at Hampton. I was just very athletic. I was very good in netball, and I actually represented St. Elizabeth on their netball team, but I had to choose because the netball season, I believe, was also like January, when track kind of, I think champs was like around March. So yeah, but I went to very high level in netball. And at Hampton, we had all kinds of stuff, badminton, like British kind of stuff, badminton. I think we had some table tennis or something else. But basketball was fairly popular, and I think they were okay with that. But I think the idea of track and the speed and all that stuff was probably intimidating to them. But they did embrace it before I left, because they started getting some national exposure on TV. And yes, I remember my principal started getting very excited about the idea.
That's awesome. Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to jump to Stets. What propelled you to transfer to Stets?
Well, this was a very interesting story, but my life is an open book. So of course, when I finished Hampton at 15. At 15, yep. And so back in those days, we had to do what they call CXC, GC, some subjects. And I got, I believe, 5 subjects at the time, and it wasn't enough to get me to 6th form. So I was repeating 5th form to get more subjects. So, but for the most part, I was kind of just goofing off and, training. At that time, I had sort of established myself as an athlete nationally, internationally. And so, and by then I was in the boarding school, because Hampton is a boarding school. So I'd been a boarder for maybe about 2 years, so I could have more time to train and all that. But while I was there doing that last year, I got into trouble, which wasn't, in retrospect, I didn't really do anything bad, but based on the kind of school that Hampton was and is, they frowned upon it. I was on someone's typewriter one weekend, and I typed a note, and there was nothing really bad in the note, to be honest. I mean, I didn't curse or anything, but I wrote a word with dots. I didn't spell out the word, and it was a very innocent kind of message I wrote. I just left it there, and the person who owned the laptop, took the laptop over the weekend to the typewriter's teacher's lab, and she found it that Monday morning. So then, of course, that's a big no-no. We get punished kind of for all kinds of things at Hampton. And I only have fond memories of Hampton, truthfully, but so she had to find someone to punish, because someone was obviously using her desk without permission. So the only name that was on the paper was the girl's name, who was the owner, but obviously she hadn't written the note. So of course, it just fast forward, it went to the principal, and I got in trouble. So, they said it warranted expulsion and all this stuff. And it was so ridiculous. I won't even outline what it was, but that's kind of what their stance was. Hampton is very, very high discipline. So at that time, she said, the threat was over my head for a couple of days. I thought my mother was going to come and I was going to get in all this trouble. And so it was over a Christmas break. And so the end result was, she said, because of who I was and my, track record at Hampton or whatever, they wouldn't expel me, but I would have to become a day girl again and start going back and forth. And, I was so aggravated with the whole thing, because it was so ridiculous that I was like, oh, forget this. This is crazy. And so, being a day girl, I mean, like, school was over at 3, by 3:10, the bus was there. There was no time to practice or anything. So, where I live in Longwood, which is half mile from Stets. So my coach said, you're going to have to practice at Stets, because by this now I'm like 16 and I'm representing Jamaica and whatnot. So I could no longer like do my walk up to the bar and jump type of situation. I needed to, so really that was it. So I lollygagged for a while and was playing netball and whatnot. And then eventually I had to ask Mr. Oliver if I could train at Stets. And I had no idea what training was. Absolutely no idea. And it was a big wake-up call because he said jog, and I was like, jog?
What is that?
And I was miserable. It really was. It was. But so that's really how I ended up training at Steps, because I was now going to Hampton, and the bus, I would get off the bus in Santa Cruz and walk up the Steps and train and then walk home. So that's really how I got to Steps. And after doing that, while still at Hampton, I got my subjects, and it was like, yeah, I didn't feel like being bothered with them anymore. So I was just like, you know what, I want to do, go Penn Relays. I want to do fun stuff. I was still young. I had all my subjects. I had scholarship offers, but I'm 16, I'm 17. So I was like, okay, I want to see what Penn Relays is like. Of course, I didn't get to do that while I was at Hampton. So I was like, okay, I'll move over to Steps and kind of enjoy what the whole track experience is.
And because you were young, you would have had eligibility to compete for Steps.
Yeah. Right. So by the time I came here and picked up my scholarship, I was right in line with everybody else. I didn't. Right. Yeah, because I finished at 15, so I had almost like a 3-year window.
And we're going to touch on Penn Relays, and we're going to touch on well, we could jump straight to college now, because we know that I know that you were a successful athlete from high school, right? You chose to attend George Mason over the array of university that seek you out, because I am sure there's not just one university that wanted you. Why George Mason?
Very simple. You know, I'm a country girl, listen to your mother kind of thing, no more, no less. I mean, I really was. I was recruited by everybody. I never knew one different from another at that time. But, you know, again, country, I didn't have any relatives in the States. Coach Ebanks was the assistant coach at that time at George Mason. And he came to Negril, found my mother and said, give her a business card and, you know, solicited, you know, try to get her blessing, and said, I'll take care of your daughter. That's pretty much it. And so my mother had this business card. He offered me a scholarship from a couple of years before. One day I was at the stadium and my name got announced, and he introduced himself and blah, blah, blah. And at that time I wasn't all that pressed for college or whatever. So he said, I'll basically hold the space for you kind of thing. But when it came down to it, when it was, it was time to go at this point, I got serious about University of Texas, Austin. And so I came up for a recruiting visit, and I was way impressed with them. I think at that time they were NCAA champions. The girls were big and tall. They were bodysuits. I mean, compared to George Mason, they were superstars. So, you know, as naive as I was, there was something, because they wanted me to sign that weekend, and there was just something in my, this kind of felt like too much pressure, right? So I truthfully, even as good as I was, I didn't know that. And so I didn't realize I was the top recruit for this and that. So I told her, why don't you call Coach Ebanks and discuss it with him? Because I didn't understand that competitive thing, and I was well sought after, all that stuff. I knew that it didn't feel right to make it to her. So I left and felt completely fine about my answer to her. And so anyway, I think Coach Ebanks realized I was kind of not that interested in George Mason anymore. And he pursued me, and he said, you made a commitment, Diane, you made a commitment. And that wasn't the end all be all. One day so of course I was discussing this with my mother and selling her on why Texas was a better option. And she said, I mean, I really feel better if you go to George Mason, because I know the coach. Having business card, kind of thing. And that was it. Said, I would feel better. And I said, okay. And that just based on my mother's comfort, I chose George Mason over Austin, the #1 school. And I never regretted it. And because as a matter of fact, the very next year, their program fell apart, believe it or not. there was some scandal and it eventually bounced back, but at least when I was a freshman, probably sophomore, it was in upheaval. But I had an excellent tenure at George Mason, and it was a great decision, but it was really based on my mother. No, nothing else.
Okay, good. So we know that you're a graduate from George Mason University, and many people are not aware of your major academic and athletic success, right? You not only jump, but you were a heptathlete athlete. You do the heptathlon, which is like what, 7 events in 2 days?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, I did I started out, as I said, with high jump and long jump. And that was easy. That was very effortless, truthfully. It was in 1988. I was at Stets, and Jackie Jonyer-Kersee had won the Olympics. I don't know if she had broken it. I don't remember the details, but I know she was on the front of Track and Field News. And coach gave me a copy of that magazine and said, this could be you one day. And I was like, yeah, right. So and he showed me all the events that were in the heptathlon, and high and long were there, which I had down pat, but I was like, oh, I can't hurdle, I can't do shot put, I can't do javelin, so and so. And he's like, nope, I'll show you. And so at some point, I guess I said, okay. And so we started practicing the other events, and we didn't have the right equipment, but we made do with what we had for the hurdles, the javelin, shot put, 800, 200. It's really, you don't need anything for that. And so before I left Jamaica, I actually did my first heptathlon at a Carifta game somewhere, Cuba or somewhere. And everything went fine except for the 800, which is the last event. I mean, I would say I was kind of a lazy athlete. Let's just say complacent, didn't have to work hard, and the 800 required training.
But in terms of scoring points, you'd have been way ahead in the point standing, so that even if you come way down in the pack of the 800, you still would win.
Well, at a point, yes, that was true. But like my first one, it was so painful. It was unbelievable. I think I ran like 3 something for the 8, and it was awful. I mean, I never knew people felt that kind of pain running. If people run and you just, I don't feel any pain doing high jump and long jump. So that was a rude awakening for me, but I did it, and it wasn't amazing. It wasn't terrible either, because I was so good. I was so much further ahead of everybody in the long and the high, and I just kind of bounced through the rest of the stuff. But after that, I decided this was an event for me, and because I realized not everybody could do 7 events. And so by the time I got to George Mason, I did indoors. We did a pentathlon, which is 5. And, my 800 was equally awful. Even at our 50th get together the other day, my teammates were reminding me how terrible my 800 was, and I almost lost because of my 800. And it was really after my first year, I was kind of like, okay, this is horrible. I cannot allow one event to allow me to, because it's always the last event, so you do so well, and it's always down to, okay, you have to beat, she can't beat you by more than blah 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 seconds. And so everybody kind of know where everybody is, but and I've always been like 500 points ahead, and still just kind of scraped through because my 800 was so bad. So I decided to kind of work on that, and it required training. There was just no workaround. And so while I was in college, of course, then I finally experienced real training, like hills and 6-300s and all this kind of stuff.
Real workout.
Familiar with.
Real workout. You held the heptathlon. Am I saying it correctly?
Heptathlon.
Heptathlon record for the Caribbean. You also broke Jackie Jonyer-Kersee NCAA championship record, right? And a lot of people, just to kind of give some back information on who Jackie Jonyer-Kersee is. We know that she's a retired American track and field athlete. We know that she was ranked among the all-time greatest athletes in the hep, as well as the long jump.
Yes.
We also know that Sports Illustrated for Women magazine voted her the greatest female athlete of all time. You broke her long-standing Hep record.
Yeah.
What inspired you to decimate her long-standing record? Where did that motivation come? And I'm thinking that you might want to say the magazine. I'm not sure.
No, because that was, it was just weird. So I first heard about Jackie in 88, and I broke her record 7 years later in 95. So I heard about her as an Olympian. I broke her collegiate record, which she had for 13 years. I now have that record for 26 years.
Oh, wow.
So it still stands
Yeah.
as of 2021. So
Yes.
26 years. So nobody has broken that record yet. But like anything else, you don't go in the meet saying, oh, I'm going to break somebody's record. You go in saying, I'm going to do my best performance. I knew it was my last NCAA. What did inspire me though, I had the long jump on the first day. And of course, that was like my pet event. And I'd won it several times as an NCAA champion. And I lost it by 1/4 of an inch. And there was just nothing I could do. I gave my best effort. I probably even had a PR or whatnot, but the weather changes over the course of the evening, and I had a headwind, and literally she beat me by 1/4 of an inch. And that's a painful loss for your last NCAA. So I was kind of grieving that, and I was sore, I was hurt, I was miserable,
Yeah.
And then the next morning, the heptathlon started. And so, while I'm up against all these fresh athletes, I've already jumped 10 times the previous evening. And I remember my coach was kind of stretching me out, massaging me that night, and just kind of cheering me up and whatnot. And there was something inside of me just said, I'm going to avenge this, So as sore as I was, I just went out from minute 1, first event, the 100 hurdles, and I had a PR. And and when you have a good start, I think it just kind of translates.
Right. A good finish.
Propels you. Yep.
Yeah.
And then I went right in the high jump. Wasn't a PR, but it was one of my better performances. I surged ahead. I had a good shot put. And of course, my coach, he's the one who coached, this is Norm Gordon. He stays on top of the numbers, right? And so he's like, oh my God. So by the end of the first day, he was like, he's watching the record. I'm not. I'm just focused on performing. And so he was looking at the numbers, and he says, boy, if you keep this up next day, you could. It's in shot. It's in view. And so that felt fairly exciting by the end of the first day. And of course, they started announcing it. This was the first time I was really aware that it was possible. And so, of course, by day 3, I am sore as you can imagine. I've done now 5 events. And so anyway, first event is a long jump. I had a PR. And so my numbers went way ahead. And now we only have 2 events left. And so, yes, everybody, I'm having the cheering, going, okay, if you keep this up, you're there. And so then I had the javelin, I had another PR, and everything just with a sport like that, an event like that, everything kind of has to fall into place. You don't have to win every event, but it helps that I think I had 4 PRs. So by the time we got to the javelin, I was way ahead. And now with one event, they'll say, okay, as long as you run, because we know the point system, as long as you run this, you're going to get it. And so I ran my poor little heart out, because I hate the 800, but I was not going to play this time around. And I ran it. I think it was a PR at that time too. And I beat her record by a good margin. But in heptathlon, even 10 points is a lot, and I think I beat it by 100 points. It was a good amount. And I knew it was good, but I certainly didn't expect it to last 26 years.
26 years and counting.
Nobody has come along so far.
Yeah. So one of the things that is that many people are not aware that you are one of the most decorated female athletes at the Penn Relays. You are the most outstanding female college athlete in 1991 and 1995. Not only that, but you won a record 12 relay championship watches. I didn't get one. So you won the college long jump and the hep 4 times, each setting 3 carnival records in the heptathlon. When you look back at your athletic success, right? What are some of the highlights that you would that you can pinpoint that attribute to such great bio? Example, it could be the will to win, or perhaps is the to prove a point. You know what I mean? That I'm good enough. What is it that really?
You know, at that time, I didn't have anything. I was just going on natural instinct, I guess. You know, just with the background I gave you, I never had any parents. My parents have never come to one of my track meets. I've never. So I never had anybody pushing or prodding or supporting or anything like that. So I had a talent. There were people who saw that talent along the way and kind of cheered me on. So I think, you know, God gives all of us a talent or a gift. Mm-hmm. And that was just one of my gifts. And I definitely have a competitive spirit. I still have it. So I'm sure I had it at that time. And winning feels good. And I think at some point it clicked that you can change your life, you know, by putting in extra effort. And I think just having a competitive spirit is not something that you really think about. It's just an instinctual thing. Yeah. And so I've had, especially Penn Relays, I love Penn Relays because I've had so many battles at Penn Relays. It wasn't an easy thing, especially in the high jump. Oh my goodness, it was so much fun because it was at a high level, you know, yeah. And I wasn't necessarily the favorite. I really had to compete. And I didn't necessarily have the best technique. Sometimes in the middle of the meet, you know, because I remember when I was trying to learn Fosbury flop, I mean, we didn't have the sponge, we didn't have the stuff, but I knew I needed to. We didn't have YouTube where I could log on and watch, you know. Yeah. And I had to teach myself, and so and you have better stats than me. I haven't really kept. I really, some of the stuff you just said, I'm like, really? I just know at some point they said I was the winningest athlete in the history of Penn Relays.
Yeah.
And I think they said it was 6, believe it or not, Dennis, I did not have a watch either. I gave away every single one of those watches. And my mother, before she died one day, I was like, you know what, I should have one of these watches. And she gave me hers. Oh. But I literally gave them all away because you get naive. You just don't really know the value of anything. Mm-hmm. And so I won them all for individual performance because I wasn't part of a 4x4 or 4x1. Yes. I think that's what made it special. By the way I live my life, I don't give a lot of, it was an experience. It was a great life experience. Mm-hmm. It was fun. I battled. I mean, it just good memories, really. Yeah. You know, and it's just all a phase of your life. And I don't really hold on to any particular phase in my life, but it's where I am now. And all those things obviously play a role in where I am now.